On an icy, desolate shore, Dr. Walker cradled a tiny penguin chick in his arms, its eyes not full of fear but a strange understanding. As he uncovered the truth behind its survival, a chilling realization struck him. This chick was no accident, but what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The cold wind howled across the desolate Antarctic landscape, biting at Dr. Lucas Walker's exposed skin, yet his attention was firmly fixed on the sight before him. His breath formed clouds in the air as he kneeled, eyes narrowing with disbelief. The little penguin chick, a fragile bundle of downy feathers and helplessness, had taken the most improbable leap of faith, straight into his arms. Dr. Walker was no stranger to the harshness of the frozen world around him. Years spent in these extreme conditions had hardened him to the routine of survival, to the constant exposure to nature's brutal indifference. But this was different. The chick's desperate, trusting leap ignited something inside him, a flicker of warmth in a place known for its unrelenting cold. His breath caught as the tiny creature, trembling in his grasp, nuzzled its beak against his coat, seeking comfort. He could feel its fragile body shiver, its tiny heartbeat quickening with fear, or perhaps with a sense of new hope, though the meaning of the moment was far from clear. The chick's eyes, wide and bright, filled with a helpless need, locked onto his, a silent plea for protection. Lucas knew the stakes. Penguins were social animals, deeply reliant on their colonies. A lone chick, separated from its parents in the freezing isolation of the Antarctic, stood no chance. Starvation, predators, the sheer cold. There were too many ways for such a vulnerable creature to meet its end in this unforgiving environment. But it wasn't just the situation that struck him, it was the chick's uncanny instinct. Even in its panic, its fragile condition, it had recognized something in Lucas, a figure of hope, of life. The harsh wind and ice were nothing compared to the warmth that surged within him as he cradled the creature in his arms. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the wind dying down, the snow falling more gently around them. Time slowed as he held the little one, his mind racing with the gravity of what had just transpired. How had it come to this? How had this penguin chick ended up so far from the safety of its colony, alone and vulnerable? His trained instincts screamed that it was a rare and dangerous encounter, a sign that something had gone awry in the delicate balance of nature. With his breath still coming in shallow bursts, Lucas slowly rose to his feet, the chick snuggled against his chest for warmth. He could feel its soft body tremble slightly, but its breathing had steadied. There was an undeniable connection between them, one born out of pure, unspoken need. The penguin chick needed him, but in that moment, he too needed it. In the vast frozen wasteland, amidst the vastness and silence, this little creature had chosen him, and with it, a bond had been formed, a bond that, for better or worse, would change the course of their lives. Dr. Walker stood frozen in the dim light of the research station's interior, his mind struggling to reconcile the overwhelming sense of unease that had gripped him since his first moment with the chick. The cold, sterile walls of the station, filled with the usual hum of equipment and the faint scent of chemicals, felt miles away from the stark, frozen landscape outside. Yet, inside him, a tension gnawed at his thoughts, relentless, suffocating. The chick, small and seemingly fragile, was now perched gently on the workbench, its glossy black eyes fixed intently on him. He had expected the usual signs of distress from a displaced penguin, the frantic movements, the nervous chirps, the instinctual attempts to return to its colony. But this one, this peculiar little creature, did none of that. It was almost as though it understood its situation, accepting the strangeness of its circumstances with a level of composure that unsettled him. Its eyes, dark and knowing, followed his every movement, and every time he reached toward it, it didn't flinch or retreat as most animals would. Instead, it met his hand halfway, as if acknowledging his presence with a silent agreement. and understanding. The first sign of the growing mystery came when Dr. Walker tried to feed it the usual penguin diet: small fish, minced, and softened for easy consumption. The chick took one look at the food, sniffed it, and then, with a deliberate turn of its head, rejected it. He watched in bewilderment as the chick turned its gaze back to him. There was no wild panic in its movements, no signs of distress. It simply refused to eat. This wasn't right. Penguins, especially chicks, were programmed to eat almost instinctively when food was available. Starvation was often their biggest threat in these barren regions, and any opportunity to nourish themselves was seized without hesitation. But the chick wasn't acting like the others. It seemed to have something more important on its mind than survival. After several failed attempts to coax it into eating, Dr. Walker, almost out of desperation, tried something unusual. He held a small piece of fish in his hand and extended it slowly toward the chick. The moment it saw the food, it hesitated, not out of fear, but as if it were considering something far deeper than a mere hunger. Then, with a delicate hop, it inched forward and accepted the morsel, not with the ravenous desperation of a starving animal, but with a purposeful calmness that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. As it ate, it didn't seem entirely focused on the food. Instead, its eyes flickered up toward him, holding his gaze. There was something almost too human in its expression, too aware. For a fleeting moment, Dr. Walker couldn't shake the feeling that the chick was studying him, weighing him, perhaps even understanding the very act of caring for it. Each movement was deliberate, measured, as though it knew precisely how to interact with him, to elicit the response it wanted. And a chill ran down his spine. Was it simply coincidence? Could a wild animal truly possess such an uncanny level of intelligence? The thought gnawed at him as he watched the chick finish the morsel. Its eyes never wavered from his, and when it was done, it gently stepped back, as if signaling that its needs had been met, its trust given. Dr. Walker sat back on his heels, deep in thought, his scientific mind grappling with the impossible. There was something about this little penguin chick that defied logic, that pressed against the boundaries of what he knew about the natural world. And though every instinct screamed that this was simply a strange, isolated incident, a small, persistent voice whispered that he was standing on the precipice of something far more profound, something that could change everything he thought he understood about the world. The chill of the Antarctic evening settled heavily over the research station, the air thick with the weight of something unspoken. Dr. Walker sat hunched over his desk, surrounded by glowing screens and scattered notes, the faint hum of the satellite data stream filling the silence. His eyes scanned the charts, his fingers tracing the lines that represented the migration patterns of the penguin colonies he had studied for years. The numbers, the coordinates, the migration routes, they were all so familiar, so methodical, like a pattern he knew by heart. But something was different. Something was terribly wrong. His gaze fixed on the data for Charlie's colony. The coordinates, once vibrant and active with the movement of thousands of penguins, now showed a void, an empty space. There were no signs of movement, no return routes, no evidence that the colony had even existed for the past several weeks. A knot twisted in Dr. Walker's stomach as he clicked through more screens, searching for an explanation. But the anomaly remained. The colony, his colony, had simply vanished. No migration path, no signs of struggle, nothing. It was as if they had never been there at all. He leaned back in his chair, the cold creeping up his spine. The disappearance of an entire colony, with no trace, was unprecedented. Penguins didn't just vanish, not in the harsh, unforgiving environment of Antarctica. They had patterns, habits, routes. They followed the same seasonal rhythms. But now there was nothing, just a gaping, eerie silence where once there had been life. Dr. Walker's thoughts spiraled as he tried to make sense of the data. Could it be a glitch? Some kind of freak anomaly with the satellite's tracking system? He double-checked the equipment, but everything seemed to be functioning correctly. The data was clear, undeniable. His fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled through the reports, each detail more unsettling than the last. It wasn't just the loss of the colony that gnawed at him, it was the chilling realization that Charlie, the lone survivor, was somehow connected to this mystery. How had the chick survived when the rest of the colony had disappeared without a trace? Was it possible that Charlie had somehow known, somehow sensed the danger before it struck? It was a thought that sent shivers down his spine. He had found Charlie in the aftermath of something. He was certain of that now. The question was, what had happened to the colony, and why had the chick been spared? As though sensing the shift in his thoughts, Charlie perched quietly on the corner of his desk, chirped softly, a gentle, unassuming sound that broke the tense stillness of the room. Dr. Walker glanced at the bird, his chest tight with an inexplicable unease. There it was again, the strange, unnerving awareness in the chick's eyes. It stared at him with such depth, such intensity, that for a moment he wondered if the bird was capable of understanding the weight of his thoughts. Charlie's small beak tilted slightly to the side, and then, as if on cue, the chick hopped onto Dr. Walker's shoulder, a soft weight against his neck. The gesture wasn't one of affection or instinct. It was as if Charlie were positioning himself, offering silent companionship in the face of an unknowable truth. Dr. Walker's breath caught in his throat. The unease that had been lingering in his gut now blossomed into something darker, something more primal. This was no ordinary penguin. The realization hit him like a cold wave. Charlie had somehow survived because he was more than just a lost chick. He was part of something much larger, something Dr. Walker had yet to fully comprehend. And with that thought came the heavy, undeniable truth. Whatever had happened to the colony, Charlie wasn't merely a survivor. He was the last link, the only piece of the puzzle that could unravel the catastrophe that had befallen them. He stood abruptly, his mind racing with questions, each one more insistent than the last. What had happened to the colony? Why had Charlie survived when all the others had perished? And, most haunting of all, had Charlie somehow known the truth all along? Dr. Walker's heart pounded in his chest as he turned toward the window, staring out into the endless white expanse of the Antarctic night, feeling as though the answers were out there, waiting to be uncovered. And yet, a dark, unspoken fear lingered in the air. Whatever was coming, it was far beyond anything he had prepared for. Dr. Walker sat in this dimly lit room of his research station, surrounded by the glow of multiple monitors, his eyes fixed on the streams of data that now seemed to pulse with an otherworldly rhythm. For days he had sifted through the numbers, the maps, the satellite images, all in pursuit of understanding the anomaly that had gripped him ever since the discovery of Charlie, the lone penguin chick. But now, as his fingers hovered over the keyboard, a revelation so profound that it seemed to bend the very fabric of reality itself began to take shape before his eyes. The data was like an intricate web, each thread of information weaving together to form a pattern so deliberate, so precise, it could not be dismissed as mere coincidence. The chick, Charlie, had not just survived against the odds. He had survived because he was meant to survive. Dr. Walker's heart pounded as he zoomed in on a particularly cryptic sequence of genetic markers within the research data. It was as if the numbers themselves were shifting, coming alive with a hidden truth. There, buried in the seemingly mundane reports of penguin behavior and migration, was the answer that had eluded him for so long. Charlie was not just any penguin. The chick was an anomaly, a genetic marvel that had evolved for a singular, unspoken purpose. A mutation, rare and deeply encoded within the lineage of Charlie's ancestors, had given rise to a creature who could withstand conditions no penguin should survive. But it was more than that. It was a manifestation of a much larger, intricate design, one that tied the fate of this species to something far grander than the cold, unrelenting landscape of Antarctica. The colony, Dr. Walker realized with a shudder, had not been wiped out by an external threat. No storm had claimed their lives. No predator had picked them off one by one. They had disappeared, chosen to disappear. The colony's vanishing was not an act of nature, but an intentional act, a purposeful and calculated decision. They had left behind Charlie, a singular beacon of hope, a guide for humanity to unlock a hidden potential within the penguin species, an evolution that could fundamentally alter the way humans understood survival, migration, and the fragility of ecosystems. Dr. Walker leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had thought he was simply a researcher, a scientist striving to understand the behaviors of a species on the brink of ecological collapse. But now he understood that his work was part of something far more extraordinary. Charlie's leap into his arms had not been a random event. It had been the fulfillment of a purpose that stretched far beyond the frozen shores of Antarctica. The chick was not just a survivor, it was a key, a catalyst for a new chapter in the history of both penguins and humanity. The realization dawned on him like the slow, steady rise of the sun over the ice. He was no longer just an observer of nature's wonders. He had become part of something that transcended research, something deeply magical. Charlie had shown him the path, and it was a path that would lead them both towards discoveries that could reshape the future of species conservation and environmental understanding. With a breath that felt heavy with both awe and responsibility, Dr. Walker looked down at the penguin perched calmly on his desk, its gaze unwavering and unblinking. There was no fear in its eyes, no uncertainty, just an ancient, knowing intelligence. He had always believed that nature held secrets, but this was something far beyond anything he could have imagined. In this tiny creature, in its survival and quiet companionship, lay the key to an ecological revolution that would ripple through the world for generations to come. And in that moment, Dr. Walker smiled, a deep sense of understanding flooding his chest. The journey ahead would not be easy, and the questions raised were infinite. But one thing was clear. The magic of this discovery wasn't just in Charlie's survival. It was in the profound connection that now existed between them, one that would lead them toward a new world of possibilities. The future of the penguins, of ecosystems everywhere, rested in their hands. And for the first time, Dr. Walker felt a deep, unwavering certainty that they would succeed.